bridegroom. Whenever you see that, it always has eschatological application. It's always talking about the last days, and it's always talking about the return of Christ. So, for example, Luke chapter 12, 35 to 37. Be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like servants waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet. That's an interesting note right there. The wedding banquet. This is a significant pre-tribulation clue. That the whole idea is that we are in heaven during 7 years of tribulation on earth enjoying a wedding banquet. At the end of 7 years, we come back. The master is coming back. He's returning specifically from a wedding banquet. Isn't that interesting? He isn't returning from a car wash or a taco sale. He's returning from a wedding banquet. Why'd he go there? Well, I leave that up to you, but I don't think he did it by mistake. And so he's talking here about the return of Christ, the second coming, the millennial reign. All right, and we're going to get into all of that, some of the differences. It's not the rapture. I don't believe this parable applies to the rapture. I believe it applies to his return. He's speaking to a Jewish audience. They have an understanding of this, and so this is what he's addressing. And he says you need to be ready so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. Truly, I tell you, he will dress himself to serve, will have them recline at the table, and will come and wait on them. There's a whole lot of Jewish imagery embedded in that we're not going to go into. But what you have to understand is Jesus wants them thinking about the ultimate return of the King. He wants them programmed to be cognizant of this and to be dealing with this on various levels. Luke chapter 12, verses 42 and 43, the Lord answered, "Who then is the faithful and wise manager whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns." It's the ongoing idea of the return. That's where I want your mind right now. This is what Jesus is talking about. In whatever context, he's always talking about the return. Luke 19:12, he said, "A man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return." Right? He wants people thinking about this. And so that parable unfolds. It's the parable of the talent. We're all acquainted with it. And he gets to the end of that parable in the parallel gospel in Matthew chapter 25, verse 31. He concludes the parable of the talents with these words: "When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne," leaving no doubt to his audience that he's talking about that return of the Messiah, that return of the King. This is a principle that they've already wrestled through. They're aware of this. And when he speaks in those terms, instantly they're thinking about, well, who's he talking about? Who's the Messiah that's going to return? Because we know the Messiah is going to return. And in fact, if you're at all acquainted with some of the struggle that Jesus had with his contemporaries, it was the idea that they were expecting him to come as the conquering king. But he came as the suffering Messiah, and that was a real flip for their minds because they were expecting this. When he comes in his glory, and in his power, right? When that happens. So this is something that was already part of the Jewish culture, but now Jesus is drawing his disciples and believers in him into what it really means, and he's enlarging on that idea. We know in the Matthew 24, the disciples asked, "What will be the sign of your coming at the end of the age?" And in verse 30 of Matthew 24, then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. All right? You following this? The vast majority of these scriptures are spoken to a Jewish audience, talking about the messianic expectation of the building and establishing of the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Not all of it pertains to that specific idea. As we already saw, there's this little nuanced bit about returning from the marriage feast. We have the parable of the 10 virgins, the 5 foolish, the 5 wise. That's a return milieu. That the bridegroom has gone away and now he's coming back. Everybody's waiting for him. The 5 wise, the 5 foolish, they are waiting for the return of the bridegroom. And that's what they're expecting, right? It's that expectancy. And there is a fascinating video that I would ask all of the pastors here, if you haven't already shown this, show it in your church. It's called Before the Wrath. Have any of you seen that yet? A few hands going up. Before the Wrath is a great video. And it's an exploration of the Galilean wedding, which would have been the wedding traditions that Jesus would have referenced off of, being a Galilean. And so there's a couple of great parts. Spoiler alert. If you don't want to hear anything about the movie, especially the best parts, you might want to go to the bathroom right now. But there were 2 parts that absolutely gobsmacked me. They were just beautiful. So the first of these is that the bridegroom, the son, right? The negotiations are made between the 2 families. The bride price is agreed upon. That's all set in place. Now the son goes to prepare a place for his bride. Does that ring any bells? I go to prepare a place for you. The whole idea of Christ coming for people in general is this idea of the bride and the bridegroom. Amen. That's what we are. That's what the church is. We are the bride of Christ. That's what he's bought with his blood. Okay? And so the bridegroom says, I got to go get a place for you. And this was part of the tradition, is they would go and they'd build in their compound, or they'd build onto their existing house a place for this new couple to start their family. And the bridegroom would go and he would prepare this for her. He would get done with the project, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, depends on how elaborate it was, how much money they had. There's a lot of different factors. But whenever he got done and he had finished the last bit, and the last nail is hung, and the last, stuff, all the stuff that makes women feel at home, the little cow in the kitchen, the pictures hung on the wall, all the smelly stuff. It's all ready, right? It's ready. I'm done, Dad. I'm done. It's ready. And from that moment forward, it was up to the father to decide when to go get the bride. Does that ring any bells? What did Jesus say? This is only for the father. They said, when's this going to happen? He says, I don't know. Well, what was he saying? He was putting the whole conversation into this context of a Galilean wedding. And I'm sure Jesus knows. Listen, I don't think Jesus doesn't know. What he's doing is he's putting it into a context for them. That's what he was doing. He wasn't lying. He was saying, this is the tradition. This is how it works. It's the Father's prerogative. And instantly, again, that would draw their mind to the wedding feast and to everything that we're talking about. It all has a context. The other thing that happens is finally, the father says, okay, let's go get her. Boom, that night, everybody jumps up and the wedding feast proceeds to go to the bride's house. They are carrying, what do they call those chairs on poles? I wish I had a brain. A palladium, is that right? Something like that, right? A chair on poles. Does that work for you? Okay. All right. So you got four guys and they got the chair on the poles, and they come down to the bride's place and they set the chair down. The bride comes out of her quarters and she sits in the chair, and they pick her up and carry her back to the bride's home. And you know what they call it? Flying the bride. Oh, come on. You can't make that up. That's incredible. Flying the bride. That is embedded. I mean, the Jews had no idea that the rapture was part of this deal. But here's God. I mean, He's the master of fine-tuning the details. Let's call that flying the bride. You'll understand someday. Okay. So all of these things that I've been talking about, they're all pointing to the overarching idea of the return of Christ. The return of Christ for his bride, the rapture. They call this the secret coming, perhaps, is one way to describe it. But it is all of a piece with his coming to establish his kingdom. When he comes back, who does he bring with him? His bride. The marriage has been celebrated for 7 years, and now they've come to rule on earth for 1,000 years. So let's look at that a little bit, all right? In Isaiah 46, God says that he is the one who declares the end from the beginning, which is an odd twist of phrase. We humans would say, I explain the beginning to the end. But that's not the way he does it. He says, I am going to explain the end from the beginning. So if we are to take that seriously, we go to the beginning. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning. That word is Bereshit. And there's a whole school of thought that goes into this word Bereshit. I don't recommend YouTube for your theology. I don't recommend YouTube for anything. I think YouTube will get you into a lot more trouble than it's worth. And it's an incredible time waster, right? You go on YouTube so you can figure out how to fix your washing machine. And then you're looking at that side column and you go, oh, look, Elvis is alive. So now you're looking at Elvis, right? And then it's, whoa, the Bigfoot is real. And then aliens. And before you know it, you've spent a whole day on YouTube. Your brain has turned to mush. And it's just not a good idea. So I generally don't recommend YouTube, but there is on YouTube a video called The Bereshit Prophecy, Berishheet, Bereshit. If you go on YouTube, there's a couple of dozen different Bereshit prophecy videos. The one that I'm referring to, I believe, is 1 hour and 7 minutes. There's another one like it's 1 hour, 5 minutes. They're both the same video. And basically, it's a voice-over, someone drawing, and the drawing is speeded up. So it's fun to watch. It's complex, and there's no way I'm going to go into all of the various details that are in that video, the Bereshit idea. But just to summarize it, the idea is that the 7 days of creation are a model for God's plan for time. The whole idea folds back on in the beginning, right? So out of that, we're looking at the beginning. We want to talk about the end. Well, you got to understand that God created everything in 7 days, and on the seventh day, he rested. Okay? So this becomes the model. And isn't it interesting that from the beginning of measured time, we have always run with a week, 7 days. 7 days is very significant. The number 7 is very significant. The number 7 is in the Jewish alphabet or in the Jewish numerology. The number 7 is the number of completion and perfection. When something is finished, and when it's finished perfectly, the number 7, that's what it implies. So the 7 days of creation, what did God say? 7 days, it's good, 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 and then he rests. Right? So that's the image of the 7 days of creation. So Bereshit unfolds from that thought, and it applies this idea of a day is as 1,000 years. And Peter didn't come up with that by himself. That's a quote from the Psalms. So this is something that the Jews already kind of had their head around, is this idea of human history consisting of 7,000 years. From the beginning to the end. Okay? And so we see weeks cropping up in the Bible. We see the Feast of Weeks, and that's determined by counting 7 weeks from the beginning of harvest. We see Daniel's 70 weeks. We see this idea having a biblical significance. And I don't believe that's by mistake. God is really into math. You know, some of us weren't so good at math. God is amazing at math. He's amazing at geometry. He's amazing at trigonometry. He's amazing at physics. We're still trying to figure out physics. Physics is all math. How many of you understand that? Music is all math. It's amazing how much math figures into the way God creates. So he's into this whole math thing. And I know that he just loves mystifying us with numbers. He loves it. So 1,000 years per day, and all of history is a week, just like it was in the beginning. He said, I'll tell you the end from the beginning. You got a week. You got 7,000 years. So the first 4,000 years are from the death of Adam to the death of Christ. And understand that the death of Adam is not his physical death. What did God say to Adam? He said, the day you eat it is the day you die. So he ate it, and then he lived for another, what, 800 years or something. He just kept on living, right? When's the death come? It's coming, believe me. All right? So you've got that period of time between the death of Adam, and this is probably the weakest link in the chain, but the idea is that Adam lived for 34 years before he ate the fruit. And I'm not going to go into all of the stuff that's behind that statement. You can do your own homework. To me, it's like, okay, the main reason I accept it is because of the symmetry of it. Okay? We know that the Bible speaks of Adam being the first Adam and Jesus the second Adam. We know that Jesus died at 34 years. Right? We know that there were 4 years wedged in there before Anno Domini, that Jesus' birth was actually 4 years before that. He died at the age of 34 in the year 30. Okay? Some of you are going, wait, what? Whoa. Do your own homework, right? I had to dig for it. You have to dig for it. But the bottom line is I do feel comfortable with the 34 years of Christ's life. I do feel comfortable with what I have just explained. And therefore, you kind of work backwards from that point, 30 AD, and you come back to the first Adam, and it makes sense. He died because of sin. He died for sin. He introduced death. He introduced life. If God has a major plan, right? And if he's setting things up in time, he's not bound by time. He's doing it in time, right? Watch this. Boom, 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 right? And we're all going, wow, right? And he goes, it's nothing, believe me. Boom, 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 right? So let's just accept. And again, I go back to my opening statement. This is speculation, right? I'm not saying this is the gospel. I'm not saying if you don't believe me, you're going to hell. I'm not saying that my ego's at stake, even though my ego's at stake. I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is that this is a theory that makes a lot of sense. Okay. So we got 4,000 years. Now, basically, if you do the genealogies, you end up where I'm talking about. You end up with this 4,000-year span right up to the death of Christ. All right? That would be in 30 AD. At that point, what have we done? We've taken care of 4 days of the week. 4,000 years. From the death of Adam to the death of Christ. All right, so that's 4. You with me? 4. Hold that number, 4. All right, go ahead. Do it on your hands, all right? 4. I got it. 4. 4. 4. See the 4? 4. Okay. 4 out of 7 means we got 3 days we got to account for. Well, one of those days is the Sabbath. 1,000-year millennial reign, the rest. Read about the millennial reign. It's a day when the lion lies down with the lamb, which is really good news for me. It's a day when children play with snakes, which is what children love to do. But they don't get bit. There's no poison. Everything's cool. Everybody has all they need to eat. There are no politicians. Gavin Newsom does not exist. He and Joe Biden are somewhere in hell. I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. That's beyond my pay grade. I hope that they get saved somehow. Somehow. I don't know how that'll happen, but God's a miracle worker. With man, it's impossible. With God, all things are possible. But we do know that the 1,000 years, did you ever wonder why 1,000 years? Why a millennial reign? Why not a 500-year reign? Why not a 10,000-year reign? Why 1,000 years? Why not 363? I just pulled that number off the top of my head. Why not some other number? Well, because we're dealing with a day is 1,000 years. We're dealing with something that makes sense. So we're dealing with, now we've got 5 days. Count them, 5. We got 5. We got 4 at the beginning and 1 at the end. So that's 5. So that leaves us with 2 days. 2,000 years. Where does that fit? In our now. We are in that 2,000 years from the death of Christ to the millennial reign. Puts the millennial reign in the year 2030. Oh, you just put a year on it. Yeah, the Bible doesn't say you can't put a year on it. It says you can't put a day or an hour. But it doesn't say you can't put a year on it. Just bear with me. Just bear with me. 2030. 2030. What do we know about the year 2030? If you haven't been living under a rock, you know that 2030 is the Great Reset. And they aren't even pretending anymore. They aren't even trying to be secretive. They aren't even trying to deny it. They are telling you and me that in the year 2030, the whole world's going to change. That's what they're telling you. What did Schwab get up and say? He said, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. We're moving everything into a world government. And we are going to fix everything that's wrong with humanity. It's the Great Reset. We're going to fix our climate problem, which we really don't have a problem. Amen? Can I give you a secret about climate? It changes. Did you notice it changed today? It's a little different than yesterday. Right? It'll be different tomorrow, don't worry. Sooner or later, the atmospheric river's got to dry up. This is California. It changes. It changes. Everything changes. Amen. It's called weather. Right? They pay people thousands and thousands of dollars to guess what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. Right? Oh, climate change. Climate change. We're all going to die. You know how many times they've told us we're all going to die? I mean, they've missed their deadline, I think 4 times. Right? Over the last 20 years, they keep missing deadlines. Right? If we don't stop it now, you're all going to be dead by 2008. 2023? Right? So you got all these people saying we got a climate problem, we've got universal health problems, we've got poverty problems, money problems, we've got food problems. And if you've noticed, all of these problems are all of a sudden a lot more serious than they used to be. Why? Because in 2030, we got to fix it all. Now, let me tell you about these jokers. They believe their own propaganda. And they're not the only guys saying it. The UN says that the year 2030 will be the year that the Sustainable Development Goals, which essentially is one world government goals, will be arrived at. This is on their website. They're not trying to hide it. They're telling us 2030, brace yourself for a one world government. We're in control. We'll tell you how to live, and we're going to fix everything. Well, what gives them the idea that they can actually do that? We've been trying to fix everything for 2,000 years. Haven't done a very good job. Actually, for about 6,000 years. Haven't done a very good job. Well, they believe that technology and artificial intelligence and these other things are positioning us to a place where we can reach 666, the number of man. That's the significance of 666. It's not that everybody gets a big 666 on their forehead, right? The significance of the number 666 is it's the number of man. What does that mean? It's when man says, I can fix everything without God. We don't need God. We'll do it ourselves. Thank you very much. Okay, that's where this entire thing is going. And we are watching it unfold with breathtaking speed. Think about some of the things that are going on right now. The economic collapse is essential to this. You can't have total control without one world government, one fiat that is controllable by the government. That's called digital currency. All right? Right now, America is putting digital currency into place. I read an article about 3 months ago that SWIFT, which is the company that has developed international exchange protocols, If you do any international banking, you have to go through SWIFT. You have to have a SWIFT code. Any of us that have overseas works deal with this stuff all the time. You have to have a SWIFT code so they know what bank it goes to, what account it goes to. It's all designed by a company called SWIFT. Well, SWIFT came out 3 months ago on a Reuters article. This isn't on Alex Jones. This is a Reuters article that said we have developed all of the software, all of the algorithms. We have in place all of the servers that we need to shift the world to a single currency. These are the guys who handle international currency, right? Well, how do you get the world to go along with this? Because the history of conglomerating economies hasn't played well. The European Union hasn't really been a success. You can look at a lot of different experiments with this, and they never seem to work out real well. So how do we get everybody to buy into this? Well, you create economic upheaval. So what are we looking at? We are looking at worldwide, not just America, not just one country, worldwide, insane inflation. Money has gone off the hook. So right now, I was reading that in Turkey, inflation is running 80%. Venezuela, it's running 1,190%. They tell us that Europe on average is 20% and America is 8%. That's called Biden math. All right? How many of you believe inflation is running at 8%? Have you bought gas in the last 2 years? I used to be able to get it for $1.90. Now we're paying $5. Let me see, 8%. I'm not great at math, but that sounds more like about 300%. Eggs. I've heard stories about laying a golden egg, but this is ridiculous. Right? When do we start paying $10 a dozen for eggs? Excuse me. I have a problem with your math. I don't believe we're running 8%. I believe our inflation is completely gargantuan, and they know that if they start throwing real numbers around, there's going to be a revolution. But you have to understand, it's not just America. It's the world. Everybody is being set up for this because they have to move everything into a global digital economy. That's happening right now. It's moving towards 2030. I was just reading an article yesterday. The Europeans are agreeing right now on a law that says you cannot buy anything that costs more than $1,000 with cash. Anything more than $1,000, you got to do it digitally. Why? Because they want to know who's spending what, when, and where. That's the only way the mark of the beast works. That's the only way totalitarian control works, is if they can monitor how much you have, how much you spend, and where you spend it. Boy, did it get quiet. Did you feel the air go out of the room right there? It's like people are going, are you serious? Yeah, I'm serious. I'm as serious as a heart attack. Wars and rumors of wars. I learned that teachers lie. When I was 6 years old. Now, if you're a teacher here, you're a Christian teacher. You don't lie. Hats off to you. We love you. We appreciate that somebody is trying to save the sinking ship. So if you're here and you're a Christian teacher, God bless you. And I mean that. I don't know how you can do it because it's run away from you, but I'm praying for you. But when I was 6 years old, So this has been going on a long time. That was at the days when we were all worrying about Russia dropping nuclear bombs on us. And so this is how I learned teachers lie. They taught us that when the nukes start coming from Russia, our air raid siren will go off. When you hear the air raid siren, crawl under your desk, and that will save you. And I'm 6 years old. And I don't even know what a nuclear bomb is, but I have some idea of what a bomb is. And I'm thinking, this desk is not going to help. In fact, I'll probably get hurt when the desk gets mangled and crushed around my poor little body. And so I was hoping that somebody had a better idea. And they did. They came up with what's known as mutually assured destruction, the doctrine that all of the nuclear powers have agreed to, and said, nobody's going to use nuclear weapons because it would wipe out everybody. This is ridiculous, right? Mad. And then all of a sudden, in 2023, I'm hearing about nuclear weapons again. I haven't heard about nuclear weapons for 50 years. Now all of a sudden, I'm hearing about it every day, and they're serious. They aren't just talking. Putin's saying, we're doing this, baby. Amen. And Biden's going, yeah, well, so will we. I know I'm pinging some Biden supporters here, and you need pinging. Wake up and smell the coffee. Wars and rumors of wars have taken on a whole new reality. We don't have to shoehorn this. We're looking at it. We're gazing down the barrel of the gun. Amen. Food shortages. What does the Bible say? Revelation 6:6. And I heard a voice in the midst of 4 living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. That's an exorbitant amount of money. That's a day's wage, right, for a quart of wheat, which isn't enough to make bread for a family. Okay? And that's going to cost you a day's wage. Sorry, no leftover for Colonel Sanders, nothing left over for Taco Bell. All you get for working for a day is a quart of wheat. What's that called? That's called inflation, but it's also called food shortage. Did you know that in 2022, there were 110 major catastrophes in our food chain supply? We're talking about chicken farms blowing up all over the place. I mean, what are they feeding these chickens? They're blowing up, you know? And the whole place goes up in smoke. A couple of months ago, the center of European trade for vegetables, for all the food products, it's in France. That's where the center is. It went up in smoke. Baby formula. We've been eating baby formula since Adam and Eve. All of a sudden, there's no baby formula. What happened? Oh, there's a disease. How convenient. Call me a skeptic, but I'm having a hard time. I'm having a hard time with 10,000 cows dropping dead because it got too hot. It wasn't that hot. Just look at the weather. It wasn't that hot. Cows have been wandering around Nevada. It gets around 120 in the desert. Cows don't seem to drop dead. They're out there. They're skinny. They're sweating a lot, but they can manage. All of a sudden, 10,000 of them just keeled over one night because it was too hot. If you believe it, you got to turn off your TV set. You got to stop watching CNN. because you are being totally deceived. We watched the COVID-19 pandemic. This is what Klaus Schwab put on his WEF website. WEF is the World Economic Forum. You've heard of Davos. You've heard of all of the money guys getting together and planning our future. Well, the WEF put this on their website. Put this. They're not, like I said, they're not even trying to hide it anymore. COVID-19 was the test of social responsibility, and it was considered a success. A huge number of unimaginable restrictions for public health were adopted by billions of citizens across the world. That's on their website. They're just saying, we won. We can't believe how they rolled over. We can't believe how they all said, yes, sir, Sieg Heil. Whatever you want, save us from the flu. I'm going home tomorrow. You don't have to like me. You just have to think about it. Lawlessness. Lawlessness. Defund the police. What genius came up with that idea? What a brilliant strategy. Oh, we defunded the police and now crime has exponentially grown. How did that happen? You moron. We are watching the total breakdown in ethics in our business community, FTX. Now, this kid out of high school knows how to play with his computer and duped people out of trillions of dollars. Because there's no laws. There's nothing telling anybody what's right or wrong anymore. And the moral anarchy that has broken out all around us, right? 6 people shot dead, and they're defending the killer. Don't want to hurt their feelings. I mean, just the idea of transgenderism is lawlessness. It means God isn't God. I'm God. You can't tell me what I am. You can't tell me whether I'm male or female. Well, I got news for you. He made you, and he can tell you anything he wants. Antifa, BLM. There is no law. And we're watching that. It's happening right now. The intentions of the powers that be could not be clearer. What does all this mean? It means that prophecy is unfolding. You're watching. All of this is in the Bible. All of this was predicted. Okay? So, here's the coup de grace. Let's wrap this up. 2030, the Great Reset. You know what the Great Reset is? The Great Reset is when Jesus comes back and cleans up the floor with the Antichrist. The Antichrist has run his scam. He's run out of time. Jesus shows up, and he's the new sheriff, man. And he blows Satan away, throws him in a pit for 1,000 years while we all party like it's 1999 because the devil's dead. Okay? All right, so that's 2030, right? But that's at the end of the tribulation, which is a 7-year period. And there's no debate about that. Everybody knows, 7-year period. So 2030 minus 7. Do it with your fingers. I'm not saying a day or an hour. And all of this is speculation. totally speculation. Do not quit college. Well, maybe you should quit college just because of what college has become, but don't quit it because I said 2023 is the end of it all. Don't sell your business. Don't stop paying your credit cards. Don't run out and take out $500,000 worth of loans because you won't have to pay them back. I'm not saying that. Be responsible, right? Because I could be wrong. I could be absolutely wrong. I could be here in 2024 with a different sermon. And you're all going to go, you told me. And I'm going to say, well, you knucklehead, I told you it was speculative. We have to admit that even if 2023 isn't right, Jesus is coming back real soon. Real soon. So as the year unfolds, I get invitations, go preach here, go preach there. I say, well, you know, my calendar's booked up for 2023, and I don't think I'm going to be here any longer than that. I mean, I'll go ahead and put you in the calendar. I got all kinds of dates in the calendar. Ain't happening. But that's okay. If I'm not here in 2024, you won't miss my preaching. Because we'll all be in heaven. And we'll be hearing absolutely amazing sermons from the mouth of God himself. Oh, beloved, we are right there. And I'm practicing. I recommend practice. I want every head bowed, every eye closed. Interesting possibilities. Not the gospel. Perhaps, I mean, Jesus has to come back at some point. This would be a perfect time for it. I cannot say definitively that this is the year he comes back, but I can say that every indicator is that he's coming back very soon. And I personally really do believe that it is sometime this year. I believe that. I could be wrong. I won't be brokenhearted if I'm wrong. I'll just go on living for God. It's not going to change the way I live, except